Saiga 76239. That's got a trigger on it. Feel that break. Hi, this is Misha, and this is a bit of a viewer request. On the channel, many times, even quite recently, I've shown you my SGL 3194. This is a military style Saiga, chambered for 545 by 39. These were first imported, converted, and sold by Arsenal, and later by FIME Group. And this is as close as we're going to get to a factory AK-74M. They also did a version in much smaller numbers called the SGL 2194. Exact same gun, but chambered for 7.6239. And that would be a semi-auto clone of an AK-103. And it's been asked, really, what's the difference between an SGL, any of them, and a standard Saiga? Well, this gun came into the shop last week. Obviously, it's well used, but also well loved. This actually came from 9-hole down in Houston, Texas. Henry down there, this is one of his guns that he had shot and accuracy tested. He traded it in towards a VZ58, or VZ58 for our Canadian friends. And I was happy to take it, because Saigas, all Izhmash products, all Kalashnikov concerned products, Izhmash became Kalashnikov concerned for all intents and purposes in 2013, were banned from import in July of 2014. Well, they weren't banned exactly, they were sanctioned. The company was sanctioned in response to Russia's occupation of the Crimea and activities with Ukraine. And I'm not getting into the politics, but I will say America was not alone. Canada and Europe actually did the exact same thing. So these guns have not been imported for nearly 5 years. This is a standard Saiga in 7.6239. It came in as a standard Hunter Sporter. Actually, it's a relatively early import. I think you said it came in around 2006. Saigas were in the USA beginning in the 90s. Actually, Izhmash, formerly Izhmash, introduced the Saiga line. Well, actually, they tried it back in the 70s, but it didn't take off. They updated it, reintroduced it in the 1990s, and had much greater success, both within Russia and without. What they've done, they've taken the modern AK-100 series, and they've sporterized it. And there is a whole host of different configurations. Some of them the same as military, just in semi-auto. Some of them radically different sporting guns. When this gun came in, it had a sporter handguard. It had a different trigger group, and it had a hunting-style buttstock. Well, how do we know that? Well, there are some, even though this is a full conversion, there's some telltale evidence. And what makes the SGL different, these came in with the military type handguard, therefore handguard retainer, gas tube. They came in with the trigger group in the forward position, not in the back. And they came in with the thumb hole stock, so they never had the pistol grip. Well, I mean, they always had something here. And they had a standard rear tang, although this is a folder, so this... Now, the folder was installed in the U.S. by Arsenal FIME. They still had to comply with all rules, so as imported, they had a double stack mag well, so that didn't have to be opened up, but there was not a bullet guide, and the mag catch here, this space was more narrow between it and the receiver. That's how they did not allow it to take military mags, thus complying with the law. Also, the accessory lug came in not machined out. Arsenal FIME would machine that. And the front sight base did not have the bayonet lug and threads. Now, I'm not sure if these came in. I think they actually came in with a cap over it, because I've seen that, but they could swap out the sight base. In fact, the early SGLs, like the 20s, had a Bulgarian front sight base, so obviously on those they definitely swapped them out. Later ones, like the SGL 21 and 31s, had Russian sight bases and gas blocks. Notice the rivet pattern back here. Also the fact that this is one piece, the trigger guard and mag lock. Okay, now let's look at this one, the converted gun. And this is a pretty competently done conversion, if I do say so. Let me take this mag out. It's actually a Polish mag, but it looks similar to a AK-103. You will notice your standard rivets and then a second rivet. What that was originally the access pin for the trigger. So the trigger was in the back here. There was no pistol grip. You can see a leftover hole here from that in the bottom. Also, the mag catch had to be enlarged, the gap, and they had to install a bullet guide. And this is actually a two-piece, although they're joined right up together, trigger guard and mag catch. The mag catch location here didn't change, but the trigger guard had to be moved forward. We know this because you can see the original holes. Well, maybe you can't on camera with me doing it, but there are some small holes here left over from when it was in the old position. There. Also, one artifact this has is a lot of the sporter guns had a manual bolt hold open here. And so there's the slot for it. But it was taken out. A lot of the times these were taken out. Interestingly, Arsenal, KVAR, FIME, did sell a version of the SGL with that manual hold open called the SGL 21 or SGL 31-26. For a long time they actually brought less money because people didn't like that there because it was a non-military device, but later I saw people trying to sell them. It is rare and collectible. One thing, you'll see this extra kind of flat rivet here. Early on, people thought this was the installation of the bullet guide for conversion. No. This is on this rifle. It also is on this. What that is actually a rivet that can be removed if it gets worn. That's where the bolt rotates. So that is actually a feature of the modern AK-100. Now, as imported, Saigas do have a relief sight, but it's only graduated to 300 meters. So this one, they replaced that sight with a 1,000-meter military. It's another little change they can make. One nice thing you don't have to do, the bolt doesn't need to be changed because it is a standard double stack bolt. Most Saigas came in with the sporter style handguard. So the gas tube was exposed and there was not a retainer here. Some, especially late in production, did actually come with the military style handguards, but comparatively few to the ones that had the sporter. Also because of that, the cleaning rod retainer, as well as the accessory lug, of course, were gone. And the front sight either had no threads or it had 14mm threads covered by a cap, and again, the cleaning rod retainer and bayonet lug were gone. So there's quite a bit of barrel hardware you have to replace. And unfortunately, some Saigas, the gas block and front sight base are dimple pressed, they're not pinned on. And if you've never tried to remove a dimple pressed device off a barrel, you have not truly suffered. It is a huge pain in the ass, and you always risk damaging your barrel. Yeah. So the front sight base, the gas block, had to be taken off. A proper handguard retainer had to be installed. A proper gas tube had to be installed. And then a new gas block and new sight base were attached. Back when this was converted, most everyone was using Bulgarian parts, which is fine. Not quite AK-74M, AK-100, but close. And this has a earlier style AK-74 muzzle brake, but it's bored out to 30 caliber. But it is chrome lined. So again, quite a bit goes into converting. You have to replace a number of parts on the barrel. You have to tinker with the mag well, mag catch. You have to move and put in a new trigger group. You have to put on the pistol grip. You have to kind of rework the rear a bit to take a standard stock. Heck, you even have to replace the rear sight if you want to be authentic. So no small undertaking. It's not insurmountable. A lot of people have done amazing conversions, including putting side folding stocks on. But that's a whole other kettle of fish. So after you do all that work, what do you end up with? How does it shoot? Well, since this is very clearly a used gun, we took it out and ran some rounds through it. Saiga again. Saiga. Despite having a couple extra holes in the bottom and needing to have the side leftover holes plugged, these run just as well as anything. They still have the same chrome line and cold hammer forged barrel, the same original 1.0mm stamped receiver, same riveted scope rail, same high quality military grade parts. The only difference is the SGLs came in as close to military as was allowed by both Russian export and American import law, whereas the standard Saigas came in very much as a hunting, sporting configuration. So it required quite a bit more work. And that's really the difference. The gentleman who had this, Henry down there, I like the gun. I don't really like the way he did the trigger. It's not really my taste. He made a very kind of short throw. If you notice, there's not much space here. This has an original, and you can notice there's more space. It goes forward and also comes back less. Versus this. But since the trigger is something you have to install yourself, that's kind of a personal preference. I've noticed Target guys like triggers more like that. Jay thought it had trigger slap. I didn't notice it, but that gets down to styles as well. Another thing, again, personal taste, this has a NATO length stock, which a lot of people think in theory sounds great, a longer stock, but to me, and a lot of people who actually shoulder one in practice, it's just really odd with the AK's ergonomics. It's a very long stock. The SGL here has a standard Warsaw length, which might seem short on paper, but in practice works very well with the gun. But again, that's small things that a user could easily change out, because after the conversion here, this takes standard furniture. Standard stock, standard pistol grip, standard handguards, standard mag, and of course standard fire control. So you can do whatever you want. Oh, one thing to note, this does have the dimpled magwell. Not all imported Saigas had that. Some were slab side here. The SGLs were dimpled, but quite a few of the Saigas were not. It's one of those things. When the Saigas first came in, they were extremely cheap. The first time I saw what originally this rifle was, just a standard 7.62 39 Sporter Hunter in a gun shop, retail price on that caliber was $179.95. That was around 2002, maybe 2001. But it wasn't very much a hunting configuration. This was also during the assault weapons ban, and not many people were making parts for conversions. Even if you converted it back then, you were pretty limited in what you could do with it because of that assault weapons ban. So the potential really had not been reached yet. Just for completeness' sake, the 223 and the 410 versions were only about $10-20 more. So under 200. The 20 gauge was a little over 200, like 219. The 308 was pretty highfalutin. I think it was like 249, and the 12 gauge, the store didn't even have them because they were just too expensive. They were about 289, 299. So the 12 gauge was by far the most expensive of the Saiga Hunters. And again, there wasn't a real lot you could do with them back then, and you could not, especially for the 12 gauges, find magazines over 5 rounds. But of course, the assault weapons ban sunset, and given time, all that changed. And for a good 10 years, we enjoyed Saigas after the ban from 04 to 14. The SGLs first appeared as the SGL-10, which was an interesting hodgepodge. It still had the hunting stock on it, but it took standard mags and it had the fore-end converted. Those were released in late 2008. But then by Christmas of that year, the SGL-20 came out, which actually resembled this version a lot. It was a fixed stock, standard pistol grip, and a lot of the early SGL-20s had the NATO length stock. And while they did have the bayonet lug here, the SGL-20 did not have the accessory lug under the gas block. But then in 2009, the SGL-21 came out. The only real difference is it had the accessory lug. It also had our true Russian front sight base as opposed to Bulgarian. So small things, but they didn't cost any more. Then they would do what they called the AK stimulus plan over at KVAR in October of 2009. This was nearly a year after the election panics. Gun sales were down. Also, the exchange rate between Russia and America very much favored us. So that led to SGL 21's retail, not dealer, retail for $4.99. Dealer was even less, around $4.50. That was an amazing price, even then. Later, we would get the SGL 31s, first as a fixed stock, and then 2010, the SGL 3184, which was this gun, but with the metal side folder, and 3194 appeared. And then, very briefly, around 2012, the SGL 2194 and 2184 appeared, which again were in 76239. Well, in 2013, Arsenal ceased to be the importer. FIME became the importer for Saigas, or I should say the SGL. The standard Saiga was imported as of 2012 by RWC Group, which we know today essentially as Kalashnikov USA. And so the last 2 years of SGLs were done by FIME, and they would have the 3185 and 3195, and the 2185 and the 2195 maybe. Those are kind of unconfirmed, but the 3185, the 3195, I know those existed because I had several of them. What's the difference in the name? Simple. The 3185 and 3195 came with 30 round Bulgarian mags, whereas previously the 84 and 94s came with 10 round Izhmash Russian mags. Why the change? I mean, you know, it was kind of a win-lose. It was nice to have a Russian mag, even if it was 10 rounds. On the other hand, it's always nice to have a 30 rounder. But the actual reason was Izhmash did not send mags with the later guns, so Arsenal was kind of, or I should say FIME, was left holding the ball, and you can't ship a gun without a mag in it. So they had to stick Bulgarian mags and, you know, change the model number or variant number accordingly. And of course, they kept doing the fixed stocks as well. They would call those, they started off as, for example, the SGL 3161, and then there was like the 3168 and so on and so forth. There was also a 410 version like this called the SGL 41, which I think is kind of forgotten today. It was never all that popular. Good gun, reliable, but just never really that popular. And they did do an SGL 12, and that was kind of special because those were actually allowed in with the standard stock and pistol grip. They did not need the thumb hole stock. But that's a story for another day. So yeah, since this gun came in the shop, just thought I'd take the opportunity to kind of ramble for a bit about converting Saigas and a few ways to kind of tell at a glance if you've got a legitimate SGL or a respectably converted Saiga. In the end, if the Saiga's converted right, it's fine. Oh, one other thing, the markings. The markings on the SGL are a little more militarized. The markings on this are more civilian. That matters to some, not to others. But as far as shootability, they're the same because they come from the same factory. There was some stuff about the SGLs coming from the Legion division of Izhmash, which is kind of their custom shop. Think about like Colt or Smith & Wesson's custom shop, but it was still a division of Izhmash over at Izhmash in Russia. By the FIME days, they really weren't talking about the whole Legion stuff much, so I don't know if that kind of just fell by the wayside. One final thing, Legion USA, while they make nice guns, and we have several videos on them, are not Legion Russia. Totally different companies. They're just using the name. Well, that's all I have for you today, guys. If you'd like to hear more, if you're not too bored yet, check out the playlist for other stuff, including a look at the difference between an AK-100 series gun and a previous AK-74 or even AKM series gun. We'll have it there. Any questions or comments, or if you'd like to share your own Saiga projects, we'd love to hear about them below, because there's some really nice ones that people have custom done. For example, AK-104 and AK-105 clones are really great, and I wish we'd had the SGLs set up like that. And if you'd like to help support the channel, help us get to the range even more, check out our Patreon page and, donate what you can. And if you can't, that's fine. Just like, share, and subscribe. This is Misha, and I'm sure if Jay were here, he'd say the same. So we all appreciate you. Please tune in again soon for more rambling AK videos. Thanks, guys. We'll catch you then.